Well, the new film, it focuses on CSAs and
So the urban farming movement.
Urban farming movement, which is fascinating to me. Is that really where it starts? Because it seems like everything branches off of that. If you're willing to like supply your own food or make your own food, that is really the key.
That's the shot across the bow. That's where the revolution starts. And if you can sustain yourself from your community with food, it sort of radiates from that. In fact, I was just reading. I spent some time with NBC based in Israel for a few years, and I covered a lot of the stuff going on in Gaza and West Bank. And I just read about Gaza. You know, with that huge blockade, which that sounds terrible, they actually learned how to make their own soda, which was really good. And they're growing their own food and everything else. All of a sudden now the blockade's being lifted and they're really worried about Israeli products flooding the market again because they really were doing some good stuff there. So that kind of desperation forces us to amazing resourcefulness, what actually can cause some really great consequences.
So Hanson Hosein has delivered the news of the cheery side of the Gaza.
There's a cheery side to everything. I'm always looking for light in the darkness. That's why I was in Detroit. The same thing. You know, people think Detroit's on its last legs. So some people call Detroit the post-American city because America over the last 100 years has been a consumer society. This is how you started your interview. And we're now moving to this post-consumer phase, right? And so what does Detroit represent? It represents the post-apocalypse, right? The jobs are gone, there's no sustainable institutions, but now people in communities are saying, screw this, we're not going to wait for government or corporations to save our asses anymore. We're going to do this ourselves, and that's what's happening. And people think that what's happening in Detroit is merely just a taste of what's going to be happening across this country in the next, say, 50 years. So that's why I wanted to go to Detroit, because I think it might be a canary in the coal mine for what's going on. And so it's kind of scary, but it's also kind of hopeful at the same time.
And maybe the Lions will win in the next 50 years, too. It could happen.
Wait, look, the Red Wings won recently.
Right. Look at that.
They're doing pretty well. Yeah.
So is downtown Detroit, because it's been a long time since I've been there, but it is fascinating because it's both terrifying and just awe-inspiring how the downtown is ghost town-like.
Yeah, I mean the downtown where the nice buildings are is still kind of good, but yeah, you can run it's kind of like I don't know. The History Channel once had, When We're Gone, this series about what happens when humanity is wiped off the face of the earth. And within 5 years, basically, vegetation and animals have taken over, and you don't see the houses anymore because they're covered in ivy. That's what's going on in Detroit.
Is it really? Because that's what I sort of hoped.
That is so cool. I've got some great images of that. It's really amazing. But at the same time, it's really fertile land, and so people are growing stuff right there. And the farmers market in Detroit, it's one of the oldest farmers markets in the country, is extremely successful. And some great stuff coming out of there. So you contrast that with this crazy, this insanity around like the newest iPhone. So many people panicking that they couldn't get the new iPhone 4 the first day it came out.
Right away.
It's just, so the consumer society is definitely there. Why do we need to have this damn thing so quickly?
Because it has FaceTime and you can see your friend while you're talking to
Sometimes
them.
I think Apple products are like the Rubik's Cube of the 21st century. It's like fun and sort of interesting, but like 100 years from now, we're going to look back and say, what the hell were we thinking? But that's the consumerism, right? I think the technology, which is the stuff that I teach in my program, we're really into the gadgets all of a sudden.
Yeah. So you don't get the iPhone 4?
Well, it's still good. It still looks like a decent product, but I just think it's just a phone. Why are people like sort of thinking about why do people have to line up for 2 days to get a phone? This isn't like the Beatles are coming to perform in your backyard or something like that. It's a phone.
It's better than that because you can take it home with you.
Can't you wait like 3 weeks and wait for it to be in the normal retail channels? Because I think like phones have become like the watch or like cigarettes of our age, where we are identified by what our phone is. And so these people, and there are millions of them, sort of say, if I don't have this new phone the day that it comes out, I have suddenly sort of diminished in stature. And how did that happen?
I was just in a store the other day with my girlfriend. She pulled out her old phone, which granted is old, and the salespeople actually mocked her.
Wow.
For that phone.
It's ridiculous.
It is a status
How many iPhone folks out here? Okay. Anybody have the new one? Anybody want the new one after I've said all those terrible things about it?
I still want the new one. It's got the video functionality and the design is cool. See, at some point, let's be honest about consumerism, because it is a little bit like sexiness or something. There's something sexy about high-end products and not sloppy little mom-and-pop stuff.
If it's done right, but I actually have studiously avoided the iPhone. I'm an Apple guy. I've been using Apple products for years. I've studiously avoided the iPhone. I think this iPhone 4 is actually the only one that actually meets my expectations in terms of what I want in a product. Because they actually cripple these things because they're so focused on the user experience, which is very good. But the things that I want my phone to do, the iPhone has not done up to now.
Like connect.
Yeah, you're holding it wrong.
That seems to be a little issue.
Yeah, no, but yeah, obviously, they have these big companies have the resources, the smart people, and the focus to actually create these extremely great experiences. But what happens along the way is that I think they lose a little bit of their soul, and there's no accountability. Steve Jobs has his own reality distortion field where he basically, can tell you what he thinks and everybody else says, yes, the Messiah has spoken. What I like about dealing business with small companies locally is that if I'm dealing with the owner and we're in the same neighborhood, I know he's not going to screw me over because he's got to see me the next day on the street or something like that. And there's that connection, that accountability, that engagement, that totally lacking from dealing with a Home Depot. Maybe you look at the manager, but he doesn't have that same vested interest and sense of ownership over what he's doing. And to me, that matters much more. And that's okay, I'll make a few sacrifices along the way, whether it's price or whatever else, but I know that I'm building a relationship that's going to serve me better in the future.
Well, let's talk about it, because it's interesting, because it sounds so wonderful. It sounds like a Norman Rockwell sort of, It's a Wonderful Life sort of thing.
Don't I look like a guy who'd be in a Norman Rockwell
you
portrait?
Do, that's right.
Jihad man.
Mama, come to the door. But it sounds so great. But we look at, and you pointed out in the film that Starbucks and Walmart and Borders all started as mom and pop stores.
That's the American dream.
That
right?
is the American dream.
Yeah.
So can you curtail the American dream? Should Starbucks have said maybe 7,000 stores is too many, or should they have said like 3,500?
Well, in the end, they had to.
Right.
They actually ruined their brand. If we had to update the film, Starbucks really screwed the pooch. When Shrek started making fun about Starbucks across the street, and you just go back and forth. Yeah. So I don't believe in curtailing the American dream. I don't believe in government intervention and these kind of things. But I do believe in giving, in creating a fair playing field, and I believe in not allowing these people to develop so much power that they can actually distort laws and bend things towards in their own favor. So by all means, if you start this great small store and it ends up becoming a chain, great, good for you. Go make money. But let's not forget what's important here with our local economies. And I think people more and more are saying, we got to be careful in terms of the amount of control we're surrendering to these out-of-town institutions, whether they be governments or companies. The crash in Wall Street, in the last couple of years, has been a real eye-opener for a lot of Americans to sort of say, wait a minute, maybe 50 years ago, that whole idea of sacrifice and what we did in World War II and that Greatest Generation thing, there's some good things there. We grew our own stuff, we had our own towns that were actually viable, and we weren't outsourcing everything.
As if the phrase "greatest generation" wasn't enough of a tip-off for us.
Yeah.
We're going with a subpar generation.
Yeah. The middling generation. That's what we are.
But people have to control themselves. But what's to stop them? There's nothing to stop.
There's nothing to stop. I mean,
supporting for me, supporting mom and pop stores feels a little bit like becoming a shaker. It seems great, but it's going to die out at some point. They're wonderful restaurants that I love that are literally run by moms and pops.
Right.
And I fear for their health.
Yeah.
They're old. It's like, don't die.
That is a problem. Actually, I think this is the biggest problem with staying independent. Say you decide that you come up with a great restaurant or a bookstore, and it does really well, and it makes you a decent income, and you're really great for the community. The problem is that these things have a life cycle. Unlike corporations that have no soul and are like zombies, right? They basically can go on in perpetuity. What happens when the owner of an independent company decides to retire? What happens to that incredible brand and institution they built? The problem is that it dies, unless they can give it to their no-good kids or whatever else, right? And so that's the problem that we have to solve. And there's some really smart people around the country who have been thinking about what do you do? What's the legacy involved with these things? If you don't take it to chain level, how do you keep it in the community? And so there's employee ownership, there's community ownership stores now. But it's still very nascent. There's no way that we've solved this problem. It's an important observation.
Well, let's look at retail as a mandala. It's all going to blow away someday, but it was beautiful while it was there.
It's you know it's,
You don't have to comment.
no, I'm just thinking about advertising because we speak about advertising a lot in our program because advertising sort of came out of nowhere in the early 20th century. So all of a sudden we said, hey, we can use advertising to pay for our media. That wasn't ever part of the equation, and so we've grown up in the last sort of this industrial age of the 20th century with this understanding or thought that this is never going to change. That marketing is the way we communicate, and advertising supports all of our media, and this is it. But all this can change. And especially when we're going into this Mad Max society of this this economic apocalypse that we're facing, things can change very quickly.
Well, in a nutshell, can you give us just a couple titles that people should read or watch if they want to learn a little bit more?
Sure. Well, I'm a big fan of, I wrote it down here. Michael Schumann is actually a really great thinker on sort of local economies, and he wrote this great book a couple of years ago called The Small Mart Revolution, and I really recommend that because he's not about buy local, it's about local first. So you can still go to the big box stores, but think about supporting local first. Film-wise, I'm a big fan of The Future of Food, a recent documentary. That was really excellent. And a few years ago, there was the film End of Suburbia, that featured William Kunstler, he's more of a curmudgeon than I am, but a really good thinker in terms of urban sprawl and what that means for our economy and how do we sustain these things. So those are really great books. On Walmart, a really good fair book is Charles Fishman's The Walmart Effect. It says you can write a book about all the bad that Walmart's done, and you can write a book about all the good that Walmart's done too. I'm actually quite ambivalent about Walmart right now because I think they've actually changed their tune quite a bit, and they spoke to us. They actually gave us an interview.
They did.
Yeah, and they gave us full access to the stores and everything else.
I wanted more of that interview too, but maybe that's a DVD extra for me.
One day, yes.
And so your film too, you should recommend Independent America, the two-lane search for mom and pop.
That's
certainly.
right.
I would also mention the film The New Age by Michael Tolkien, which is a great film about consumerism and the me generation, and also the book The Corporation. May as well throw that out there.
Yes, the film The Corporation actually was one of the inspirations for Independent America. Absolutely.
So, to me, what it all comes down to is experience, really, and the financial issues, there are all these other things you can look, societal, political, whatever, but just experience. In my life, I actually want to have different experiences from time to time. I don't want to go to the same store every time. I don't want the same meal every day, and I want to know that I'm in a different city from time to time. So I certainly encourage people to go out and seek that diversity in the mom and pop stores and just support those local businesses because it actually does come back around to you.
I think that's a great way of summarizing. I think it's exactly the right spirit to go at it with that.
Thank
Well
you. Let's
done.
drink up, Hanson.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Cheers. That's not bad. That's pretty good. It's okay.